Tonight. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to do this, to bring a lesson. I didn't realize we were going to have all the young kiddos with us tonight, but that's a good thing. Sam made the comment, I've got to knock it down to third grade level tonight, and I said, well, usually when I teach, it's about on a third grade level. That's about as high as I can go, so we should be just fine there. This is going to be very informal and open-ended, and I want you guys. I'm more kind of an MC tonight. I want you guys to jump in. I've passed out the sheets, and this is when you teach a Christmas Eve Bible class, you've got the internal conflict of, well, how do I handle that? Do I talk about things that the rest of the world are talking about and thinking about, or do we go totally away from that, or do you kind of maybe mix some in? I kind of think mixed some concepts of that because that's what's going on right now. It's hot on everybody's mind. That's gift giving, and kind of thinking about that from a biblical standpoint. I think, once I kind of jumped down the rabbit hole, there was a lot of things that you can get to, and I probably could have added a lot more questions on here. Really, when you keep going with it, about gifts in the Bible, gifts from God, gifts to God, gifts to other Christians, gifts for our children, the monetary aspect of it, and it goes on and on. I think it's definitely a relevant time right now with the holiday season, but also just as Christians to think about as well, just from a Christian standpoint. So, and I thought about bringing up the thing up here, but I think that would slow us down too much to get to what all we want to get to for me to write it down on a deal. So we'll just kind of talk about it. You're welcome to write it down if you want on your own paper or not. It doesn't matter to me. But what are some of the gifts that you can think of in the Bible? Just kind of open it up. Yes, ma'am.
I would start with Genesis 1:17.
Okay.
It reads, "For every good thing given and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning." And then I think I go to Romans 6:23, that we have the gift of salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe John 3:16, that God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son.
Yep, all those were really good. And those all three, I think I had all three of those down. I know I had a couple of those. And I was tying those along more the lines of number 3 on our worksheet there, gifts from God. But maybe think of, for question 1 at least, what are some gifts maybe that you can think of just from a human standpoint that's mentioned in the Bible? Is there any that come to mind? Incense, okay. You're talking about with Mary, okay. So I had that one down. That's a good one. That was one of my first ones up here. A pound of oil of spikenard Mary used to anoint Jesus' feet. That's John chapter 12 and verse 3. We could turn over there real quick. That's a good one. John 12:3. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who would betray him, said, "Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the money box, and he used to take what was put in it. So 300 denarii, and I meant to look up, I was thinking, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I was thinking a denarii was about a day's wage. Does that sound about right? So about 10 months' pay, basically, if the math is right there, is what this oil cost that Mary anointed Jesus' feet with. And of course, just from a secular standpoint, anybody would think, wow, what a waste that is. But obviously with Mary, she knew who Jesus was, and I think maybe she understood more than even his disciples did about that he was going to be preparing for his death, and that's what he talks about there in verse 7. "Let her alone, she has kept this for the day of my burial." So that's a good one. Anything else you can think of? Yes. Matthew 2, verse 11. Matthew 2:11. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And so these are the wise men from the east, which was all an interesting story there, with Herod trying to find the baby and kill the baby and all of that kind of good stuff. All right, so we've got the wise men gift, we've got Mary. All those are gifts for Jesus. What about something else, maybe not specifically for Jesus? Anything come to mind?
Many times, particularly in the first and second gifts were brought to kings
Yes.
to show them honor. And the Queen of Sheba brought very valuable gifts and spices to King Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
Not specifically recorded, but David received gifts from other nations because they were paying homage to it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then you had later on, after sin entered the kingdom with the kings, now you had a situation where kings of Judah and Israel were paying allegiance and homage to other kings of other nations. I had those down. Those were good ones. Let's look at. Let's see. 1 Kings chapter 10. I don't want to go too slow because we got a lot to get to, but that is a good one to look at. 1 Kings chapter 10. You mentioned the Queen of Sheba. She was one. In verse 25, though, it says, each man brought his present. Well, let's go 24. Now all the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. Each man brought his present: articles of silver and gold, garments, armor, spices, horses, and mules, at a set rate year by year. And then it goes to talk about how many of those things he had. Obviously, his wealth was extremely impressive. But then chapter 11 starts, Solomon's heart turns from the Lord, and his kingdom starts to deteriorate. And then by the time you get to 1 Kings chapter, I think it was 15. I didn't write it down here. Let me look. Yeah, you've got King Asa in you got Ben-Hadad. Let's see. King Asa of Judah gives a present to King Ben-Hadad of Syria to end a treaty with Israel. And I wrote down in parentheses, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. Basically, Israel and Judah were at odds with each other. And so King Asa was trying to help Judah out by basically messing up a treaty with Israel and Syria. And so he gave the king there a gift in chapter 15 of 1 Kings. Another big one, Jacob's gift of reconciliation and appeasement to his brother Esau. That's in Genesis 32. Let's look at that one really quick. Genesis chapter 32. Verses 14 and 15. 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. Then he delivered them to the hand of his servants. Every drove by itself, and said to his servants, "Pass over before me," and put some distance between successful droves. So this is after a lot of time had passed. Obviously, when they were young, there was a major conflict there with the birthright and being deceived and all of that with Isaac. So this is years later. They're reconciled, but Jacob is very much afraid of Esau, and so he puts together this incredible gift that he brings before him. And of course, you have the story in chapter 33 when they meet. Jacob doesn't know how Esau's going to respond, but ends up being a very good meeting. I think Esau, runs to him and kisses him and all this kind of stuff, and it's a good thing, and he eventually accepts the gift. But that's 580 total animals if you count all of that up as a gift of reconciliation between those two brothers. Thought that one was pretty interesting and significant. Obviously, you have financial gifts collected by saints for other needy saints and ministered by Paul and Titus. 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9 talk about that as an indescribable gift there in 2 Corinthians 8 and 9. Also had financial gifts to Paul from the church at Philippi to do his work in Philippians 4. Let's turn over there real quick. Philippians, get the New Testament. Philippians chapter 4, verse 7 says, "And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." Is that the one I wanted? Okay. In verse 10, "But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again, though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Nevertheless, you have done well that you shared in my distress." Through verse 18. "Now you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me concerning giving and receiving, but you only. For even in Thessalonica you sent aid once and again for my necessities. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that abounds to your account." I think that's a really amazing sentence there by Paul. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that abounds to your account. "Indeed, I have all and abound. I am full, having received from Epaphroditus the things sent from you, a sweet-smelling aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God." Joseph's coat of many colors. I was going to get to that one on 2 because I don't necessarily think that's a very good gift, but yes, we were going to get to that one for sure. Anybody else come up with another one? No. Yep, gifts of the Spirit for sure is a big part of the New Testament. We'll get into that a little bit more when we get to question 5 there. I thought of the plant for Jonah. At the very bottom, and we probably won't get to those, but just a bunch of sayings, secular sayings that are common about gifts. The very last one, "Don't be an Indian giver." And I thought about that with God. He was kind of an Indian giver with the plant that he gives Jonah in Jonah chapter 4. But of course, it was teaching Jonah a lesson about why he was helping the Ninevites and all of that. But that was an interesting one also. The manna from heaven for the Israelites in the wilderness. That's in Exodus 16. Of course, when you start breaking it down, everything we have is a gift from God. So it's really an endless list if you just kept on and on. The land of Canaan to Abraham and the descendants. Joseph's brothers. This was another big one. Whenever, again, talking about brothers being united, whenever Joseph and his brothers were united in Egypt, when there was the famine in Canaan, they went the first time, but they didn't bring Benjamin, who obviously Joseph really wanted to see Benjamin, and so he tells them to come back and bring Benjamin. And when they do, in Genesis chapter 43, verse 11, they also bring a little balm, honey, spices, and myrrh, pistachios, and almonds as a gift to Joseph before they even realized who Joseph actually was. I had gifts brought to Solomon, which we mentioned already. Isaac was a gift to Abraham and Sarah. And Eve was a gift for Adam. If you go all the way back to the beginning, God created Eve as a helpmate for Adam. So, any others before we go to the next one? Yes, yes, Hannah's a good one. Which son was it? Samuel? Samuel, thank you. Yep, that's another really good one. All right, so number 2, can you think of any bad gifts given in the Bible? And I had the coat of many colors on this one. With it being the time of year that it is, sometimes as parents you got to be careful about the gifts that you give, because you can have jealousy real quick, especially when you have multiple children and they like the same type of stuff. So you had that in Jacob's household with the coat of many colors. That's Genesis chapter 37, which led to, maybe it was divine providence, because it's all part of the story that ultimately leads to the nation of Israel being born in Egypt. And eventually, of course, to Jesus through Abraham's promises. But it led to Joseph being sold into slavery. Of course, his dreams were part of that as well. But yeah, Joseph's coat of many colors that Jacob gave to him. Maybe not the wisest thing Jacob could have given his son. Any comments about that? Go ahead, Jeff.
The head of John the Baptist ladder.
I didn't have that. That's a really good one. I'll add that to my list here.
The bad incense that Nadab and Abihu.
Yes.
And also Saul's sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
All those things were
Yep. Yep. I had both those as well. Yes. Sacrifices to idols.
Bad things offered. If you go to Matthew chapter 4, and Satan tempts Christ, he said, I will give you all of these things.
Yes.
If you just fall down and worship me.
Right.
And evidently at that point, because he had not his power, none of his power had been taken away at that point, he could have done that.
Mhm.
That's why he's fallen down and worshiping. So there were offerings of bad gifts.
Yes.
And God says that the children of Israel took the gifts that he gave them. Said, I gave you all these gifts, and then you took my gifts and gave them to foreign gods.
Mm-hmm.
So, anything that's given in vain worship
Yes.
is going to be a bad gift.
Correct.
You can try to buy a gift. Simon tried to buy the gifts.
Mm-hmm. I had Simon somewhere. I didn't have him on this list, so we may get to him also. Anybody else?
This one was officially given, but it's rhetorical maybe. Luke 11:11. Now suppose one of your fathers asked by a son for a fish, will you not give him a snake instead of a fish, will you? Or if he asks for an egg, will you not give him a scorpion, will you?
That's a good one. Jeff?
Well, I don't think the gift itself was wrong, but when Naaman tried to give a gift to Elijah, Elijah wouldn't take it, but then his servant tracked him down and said, he's changed his mind. And all he got from it was leprosy.
It's a good one.
Cain's offering.
Cain's offering? I had that. Cain's offering. That's another kind of along the lines of what Beck was talking about.
I was thinking even the reluctant gift. If
Yeah.
you give with a heart that's not right.
Not a cheerful giver, but
I thought about, this is kind of maybe off the path, but I thought about Elijah and the widow and her son, how he asked for a cake or something to eat. She went and used her last bit of food that she had in her home, a little reluctantly, but she was later, blessed with the oil not running out. It was kind of reluctant
Yeah.
at first.
presenting defiled food upon my altar. But you say, how have we defiled you? And that you say, the table of the Lord is to be despised. But when you present a blind for sacrifice, is it not evil? And when you present lame and sick, is it not evil? Why not offer it to your governor? Would he be pleased with you? Or would he receive you kindly, says the Lord of hosts? But now you will not entreat God's favor, that he may be gracious to you. But now, will you not entreat God's favor, that he may be gracious to us? With such an offering on your part, will he receive you kindly, says the Lord of hosts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And I was thinking too, and I didn't write this one down, and y'all could probably help me with this one too. The man that asked for deliverance, and if he was delivered, he promised that the first thing that came to him when he made it home, he would sacrifice to God. What was it? Jephthah and his daughter. I mean, how sad of a story is that? But, it was, yeah. Yeah. So those are good ones. I had the coat of many colors. I had Cain, which we mentioned, offering to God the first fruit of the ground, which was unacceptable. Saul offering a burnt offering and a peace offering without waiting for Samuel. It wasn't his job to do that. And then another issue with Saul where they were supposed to destroy everything, and then he was trying to make an offering for God and all of that. Ananias and Sapphira, which we mentioned. Did we mention Ananias and Sapphira? No? So Ananias and Sapphira, of course, is a good one in Acts chapter 5, where they sell the land and they give money to the church there, which was obviously a great thing, but they lied to the Holy Spirit about how much of the proceeds they gave and things like that. So even in trying to maybe do the right thing, you can do the wrong thing. It can be a bad gift in that sense when you lie about any aspect of it, which it costs them their lives, of course. Nadab and Abihu, that was the one we mentioned with the strange fire offered. Head of John the Baptist was a good one. And then, I don't know, maybe the quail sent by God, that was an interesting one in Numbers 11. He gave them the manna, which was a gift, but they wanted meat, and they were so close to entering Canaan, which was a land flowing with milk and honey. They didn't even have to do anything, hardly. It was just there for them with all kinds of food and things. But they just kept complaining. They weren't satisfied with the manna. That story's in Numbers chapter 11. If I don't turn there, I'll probably misquote it. So let's go real quick to Numbers chapter 11. When I was thinking back to that story, I was thinking, yeah, God just gave them quail as well, and they were happy, and that was just something that happened, but ended up not being a good thing. Verse 31 of Numbers chapter 11. Now a wind went out from the Lord, and it brought quail from the sea and left them fluttering near the camp about a day's journey on this side and about a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp and about 2 cubits above the surface of the ground. And the people stayed up all that day, all night, and all the next day, and gathered the quail. He who gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was aroused against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very great plague. So he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattava, because there they buried the people who had yielded to craving.
I would not say that was simply wrong with the gift. The gift was fine.
Yeah.
They were gluttons, and he knew they would be. This was the second time he had sent quail to them.
Okay.
The first time was right not long after they crossed over the Jordan River.
Okay.
And they were grumbling because they didn't have meat, but God sent them meat. And in that time, they didn't have the consequences. He told them they would have the consequences here, but it's because they just would not learn.
Right.
But it was because he knew that it would be gluttons.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the wrong reception of the gift.
Yeah.
It was not the gift
Right.
that was bad.
Yeah, and I wanted to be clear on that. I wasn't trying to say that that God was in the wrong in any way by sending the quail or anything like that, but it was about, their attitude, and it made me write down the question, what is our attitude towards the gifts God has given us, which obviously is, something that is a big part, and it's talked about in the New Testament and things like that. But the Israelites didn't necessarily have the right attitude because, like I said, they were on the doorstep of, they didn't have to wander an extra 40 years in the wilderness, but they ended up having to because of their attitude.
Reading this question at first, my mind went kind of in a different direction. Gifts of God. Are there any gifts from God that are bad? And I thought, this is what I wrote. I said, God is just. So for whatever consequences we do receive, whether it's in this life or the next, they are good because God is good. And we as humans label it bad because we don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want those consequences. But consequences for our actions or for our sin are good
Mm-hmm.
because God said they were.
Right.
He's just.
Some of those I wrote down at the bottom are kind of along those lines. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers or no, right? Or sometimes we get what we need and not necessarily what we want. All right, let's keep moving. Number 3, what are some gifts that we receive from God on that note then? Everything, yeah. Look around.
Children's the first thing that comes.
Children, yes, definitely. And again, that goes back to Eve being given to Adam, and then the command to bear children, all the way back there. So children, families in general, creation in general, right? The earth, the plants, the trees, the water, all that stuff.
Children are a gift. If you go to Psalms 127,
I had that one, verse 3.
Children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is reward.
Yes.
Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are children who want you.
Yes, it's a good one. Fruit of man's labor. Let's go to Ecclesiastes. I have early in Ecclesiastes.
At the end of it, it says, verse 13 in chapter 12, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. Doesn't really talk about gifts, Rick.
No, but that's one of those you can almost use in any Bible class. That's a great.
That's really what I was thinking.
Yeah, chapter 3, verse 9 is good. I had down at 13. I'll just start at 9. What profit has the worker from that in which he labors? I have seen the God-given tasks with which the sons of men are to be occupied. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from the beginning to end. I know that nothing is better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives. Verse 13, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. So you have verses that talk about the lazy man. Man will not work, neither shall he eat. So we do have a role in that, but if God didn't provide all of the avenues to which those blessings come about, we would have nothing, obviously. So it's all a gift from God. And even that hard work, I know, Dad, you've talked about it sometimes. Sometimes you work all day and you work hard, and that's good sleep. That's some good rest. So there's other benefits, too, not just reaping the labor and the rewards from that. The Word of God is an amazing gift. We have the full revelation. Humanity hasn't always had that. For most of history, even, it hasn't been fully given. The avenue of prayer is a great gift. We can cast on to God through Jesus, our mediator, every care and concern that we have. Forgiveness of sins, obviously. Jesus being our high priest that can sympathize with our weaknesses. life itself, our children, our families, everything we have, fruit of man's labor, our talents and our abilities. I had Acts chapter 8. Let's go back to the New Testament real quick. Acts chapter 8 and verse 20. But Peter said to him, your money perish with you because you thought that the gift of God could be purchased with money. You know, we can't, and that was Simon the sorcerer, who basically wanted to profit off of the spiritual gift of healing, I believe it was. And so he wanted this power. And of course, Peter was quick to call him out for it. Repent, therefore, of this your wickedness. But yeah, none of God's gifts can be purchased with money in that sense. They're free. Did anybody have anything else on number 3? Jeff?
I think that a lot of times we think of material circumstances as gifts from God, and I guess they are, but all of that can be taken away from you in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
The story of Job is about that.
Mm-hmm.
I was Christmas shopping at Goodwill this week, and there was a woman working there who had her eye was like down here on her cheek. One of them was up here where it was supposed to be, and the other one was on her cheek. The skin on her face had like slid down, and it was like right there. And she had these special glasses made that covered the whole top part of her head so that she could see out of that eye that was right here by her nose. And I thought, God didn't give me that, but she got it.
Mm-hmm.
And, what are we supposed to do with these challenging gifts that we get? You can't give it back. It's
Yeah.
just yours. I mean, even people in the Bible who were slaves were told not to try to be free. That was just their lot in life.
Right.
I mean, we have to somehow figure out a way to separate the comfort and blessings that we have from the love of God.
Mm-hmm.
Because not everybody has it as good as we do.
No. Yeah, and that gets, which we probably were going to end up there at some point. God's grace is sufficient, right? Paul, with his infirmity, basically said, he asked and asked, and God's grace was sufficient. All right, so number 4 says, what is the greatest gift that God has given us? And I think it's obvious, but there's more to it maybe than... Anybody want to answer that one? Salvation, Christ, the sacrifice, which it's kind of all one, right? Even the promises to Abraham are part of that. But yeah, I put the sacrifice of Jesus, John 3:16, grace and salvation, Ephesians 2:8, salvation by grace, it's a gift of God. And what a high price to pay that was of a gift. It's not like, God just, gave us something small there. It's an enormous sacrifice for Jesus, obviously, having to go through that, but God's willingness to send him for that. And we have the example of Abraham's willingness to send or to sacrifice Isaac, and he was stopped from doing that. Basically, that's what God did in sending Jesus, and we're already about to get our first bell, so we got to keep on moving. I really wanted to hit Romans chapter 5 on this note. Romans chapter 5 and verse 12. Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men, because all sinned. For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who had not sinned, according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam, who is a type of him who is to come. But the free gift is not like the offense. For if by the one man's offense many died, much more the grace of God and the gift by the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, abounded to many. And the gift is not like that which came through the one who sinned. For the judgment which came from one offense resulted in condemnation, but the free gift which came from many offenses resulted in justification. For if by the one man's offense death reigned through the one, much more those who receive abundance of grace and of the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one, Jesus Christ. And I had through 19. So verse 18, therefore as through one man's offense judgment came to all men, resulting in condemnation, even so through one man's righteous act, the free gift came to all men, resulting in justification of life. I thought that was a pretty good summary of that, talking about it being a free gift to all in that sacrifice. Nobody else could. The blood of bulls and goats wasn't ever going to do it. Had to be a better sacrifice. All right, well, we're going to have to really just bounce through these last few. Number 5, what is the greatest spiritual gift? 1 Corinthians 13. Yeah, that's what I had. 1 Corinthians 13. Love. Number 6, what should we be doing with the gifts God has given us? I had that one. Yep. Provide for the needs of the saints. Matthew 25, really, really good one. 1 Peter 4:10, be good stewards of them. 1 Timothy 4:14, don't neglect them. Matthew 25 is really, really good on that note. 14. I'm not gonna read all of it, but I had. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Then, and this is Jesus speaking, then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. And then he flips it around and talks about the ones where he says, depart from me, you cursed, the ones that didn't do those things for the ones that needed it, didn't do it for him either. So that one's really, really powerful, I think. To glorify God. Before that second bell rings, number 7, what is the greatest gift that we can give to our children? I kind of summed it up in godly training and discipline. There's several proverbs that talk about that. I had Ephesians 6:4 down, Deuteronomy 6:4 through 9 down as well. But obviously there's a lot of needs that they have, just to raise them, just in a secular sense, but in a godly sense, godly training and discipline, bringing them to church, teaching them, raising them, disciplining them in a godly way. I think that's number 1. Does anybody want to add to that on number 7? Preparing them for the path, yes. Number 8, what gifts can we give to God? Put our heart, love, obedience, which is obedience basically is a showing that we love Him. There's lots of verses about that. Worship, praise, bringing others to Him, taking care of His people. That was just a quick rundown. Anybody think of something else maybe you want to add to that?
What is good? What does the Lord require of you? Do justice, love, kindness, all things.
Yep. Yep. What'd you say, Joe? Thankfulness, yes. Being appreciative of it. Kind of like what we talked to back with the quail stuff and the Israelites. Acknowledging. Number 9, I brought up the widow's 2 mites. It's not always about monetary value. It's, what you have to give, motivation behind it. And then the questions there at the bottom, you can look at if you want to. Appreciate y'all's attention. I think we're out of time tonight.